backup. Okay. So TSM is on red. Golden Guardians opens Syndra. And then TSM responds Akali. And then we have Rumble and set. So this will be Rumble. And then what did I have for set? Vi, right? So I had Vi for set. And then we have Aurelia and GP. Okay. And then first pick, we had Aphelios. Who, what am I using for Aphelios? Aphelios is Amumu. Okay. And then we had TSM respond Zyra Khan. Zaya and Rakan. And then Golden Guardians responds Atrox and Thresh. Okay. And then TSM responds Kiana. Oh, Kiana isn't here. What? Okay, but Senna's not in here. Okay. And then the bans go Leolise. Okay. And then for Golden Guardians, it was LeBlanc Camille. Okay. And then they pick Jarvan Zoe. And then TSM picks Ornn on R4. And then R5. Oh no, I'm sorry. They pick Gragas on R4. Okay. Alright. So alright. So let's talk about certain things. We are decided on doing this draft, yes? We are absolutely decided on this. How was Gragas left open for so long? Nemesis, you here? You ready? We learning or what? I'm doing Fnatic G2 next, okay? Or got into set. Songju said it's bad, so. Okay. Crown shot here? Crown shot learning or what? So, alright, out the gate, let me get Epic Pen open as well, so that I can draw. Can you guys see the Epic Pen, when I draw? I'm gonna use blue. Use blue. Ooh, shit. Can you guys see when I draw? Ooh, you can't. Properties, multi-adapter. Shit. You actually can't see when I draw. That's really weird. Oh, that's very strange. I don't know how to change that. Also, I just got dust in my eye. Oh, I just got dust in my eye and I have contacts on. That hurts. What do you mean, how am I always dying? It already feels really bad, like, that this happens. You don't know what it feels like. It's like reminded of a disability. You know? It feels awful. It's like you're reminded that you're broken or that like something's wrong with you. It feels really bad. So comments like that don't do anything but like just make it feel bad, you know? It's like fucking bad. Yeah, I can't just wear glasses, Twitch chat. I have special contact lenses that I have to get every couple of years. No, I'm not doing. All right. So, all right, let's talk about something. So, Aphelios. Well, let's talk about the bans in general first. So Aurelia and Gangplank
these aren't very good bans. Aurelia, Gangplank, and Syndra aren't like well, these are only deemed good bans if you're intending to blind champions that they can end up responding to. But these champions can't come in solo. And what I mean by that is that you like, alright, fuck, how do I describe this? There are B1able champions, right? B1able champions are champions that are defined as champions that can fit in many different types of team compositions. They can fit in many different types of themes. They have many different modes. They have the ability to have scaling components or scaling aspects to them. They function versus a wide array of matchups outside of just like the team compositions, and they have synergy with a lot of things. Those are B1 champions. So a list of B1 champions would be like Gragas is really good. And Gragas is able to fulfill many roles, right? He has many different modes. He's able to be like off tanky AP. He's able to be tanky in spots where I guess that you need him to be, even though it's extremely it's less common to have Gragas do something like that. He's able to go glass cannon AP if you have AD top, AD mid. And then you have like a really strong AD in bottom. It's very unlikely that the opponent is actually going to itemize any sort of magic resistance. Gragas can both be used as a primary engager. He can be used as like semi-early game tempo and aggression. He can be used as a really good counter and match ganker. He can be used as a disruptor against certain team compositions that are trying to do something very specific that involves like their backline or their midline. He's very good at protecting his teammates as well. So Gragas just has many, many, many types of modes. Now, another champion that is very similar to that is obviously like Ornn. Ornn has many different types of modes that he has available. He has many different ways that he can play out team fights. He has many different ways that he can actually utilize his R against various team compositions. He's able to be flexed into multiple roles. He's able to have different itemization build paths. Mostly all centered around obviously the two core pieces, that is Sunfire Cape and Abyssal Mask, and then from there it begins to deviate depending on what it is that you're trying to achieve with him. So in that regard, Ornn is another B1able champion. Aphelios is obviously really strong, and he's also overtuned. He's able to go up against pretty much everything, and he's able to do a lot of different things, obviously given the nature of his kit. So Aphelios is also another B1able champion. Misfortune is a B1able champion, again, due to the nature of her kit, her flexibility, the amount of different bot lane matchups that she can end up going into, the fact that her stats are obviously really good, she curves really well, she aligns with a lot of other champions inside of the meta, so like AD carries, there's going to be a few that are actually B1able. Xayah is also B1able, Ezreal is B1able, because he again, different modes, different playstyles, able to do different things, able to have flexibility with supports and stuff like that. Gangplank is B1able if you're extremely proficient at him, and obviously he gains points if you have the ability to flex him. Cho'Gath is semi B1able, but again, it depends. It also depends on like what color you're playing on. Cho'Gath ends up being B1able. Champions like Ryze are not B1able. Champions like Diana are not B1able. Champions like Akali are actually not B1able. Champions like Quinn are not B1able. Champions like Tristana are not B1able. Champions like Vayne are not B1able. Champions like Zyra not B1able. Veigar not B1able. Karthus is actually kind of weird. I think that when Karthus had the extra 50 damage and the jungle was in a lot better place, I think that he was B1able. I have to look closer at the changes in 10.3 to further evaluate Karthus in terms of just like where everything's at right now. But Karthus used to be a B1able champion, but he was one that obviously came with conditions. Ezreal obviously B1able. So that's obviously that's completely fine. We're just like looking at other champions right now. Soraka in her current state, in terms of like flexibility and into mid-top AD and support, she's also B1able, primarily only because of that. If it wasn't because if she didn't have the option to go into top and mid and fit the way that she does against the current meta, then she's not a B1able champion. She has to end up coming in on like B4, B5, which naturally means that she's most likely just going to be better on red side. Aatrox is not a B1able champion either. He has way too committed of a theme. He doesn't have lots of alternate modes, and if you do try to make him go into alternate modes, he ends up being weak, he ends up being susceptible. There's ways to draft around him. So I believe that last time I had this discussion on stream, I think that we concluded that there was about like 18 or 19 B1able champions. A lot of them obviously AD carries, because you don't want to give away too much information inside of the draft. I actually have to really pee really quick, so I'm so sorry. I'm going to take a brief pause. 1 second, please. Okay, I'm back. So that's the description on B1able champions. Karma is B1able. So yeah, all right. So there we go. All right, so that's fine. So B1 Aphelios. B1 Aphelios is fine. I also think that there needs to be a lot more time to evaluate Aphelios. He's obviously only been rearing his head in pro meta now for about 3 weeks. So there needs to be a lot more time, and then we also need to see what ends up happening to him after the nerfs. After the B1 Aphelios, TSM actually responded with R1 Xayah, R2 Rakan. R2 Rakan is really bad. R1 Xayah is completely fine, but even R1 Xayah is a little bit weird, because Xayah, when the enemy already shows the Aphelios, it's not that the Xayah is bad, and some people might be wondering, well, if Xayah is B1able because she's able to go against a lot of different types of team compositions, why would I not R1 her when the opponent shows Aphelios? And then the question becomes, are there better R1 champions in this spot when the enemy ends up having Aphelios? And I think that the answer is actually yes. I think that Senna and Misfortune are actually both better than Xayah inside of a vacuum, which has led to the the Holy Trinity that is those 3 champions currently inside of the bot lane. So in that regard, I actually think Senna is the best out of the 3. If you and your team are all like really good and on the same page, I think that Senna has a lot more diversity, and I think that she's a lot more obnoxious. Whereas obviously Xayah, MF, and champions of that nature, they're a lot more straightforward, and even though they are really, really good, MF mostly in part due to her flexibility as well as just her damage, her ultimate, her synergy inside of the meta and stuff. It's all really good. So the first error starts with Rakan on R2. So I'm gonna I kind of want to eliminate now the rest of the bans, but for sake of the conversation, we'll just go through the draft. So the Rakan on R2 basically suggests that even though Rakan is a champion that historically has been able to fit into many different team compositions, even not accompanying Xayah, and in himself is a good champ that has different modes, Rakan really does function by doing one mode better than the others. And so this is sort of like what I mentioned earlier, when a champion can do other modes, but there's going to be other champions that just do those modes better than that champion. The way that Rakan is in his current state, some of the other tank supports obviously outshine and excel at different areas than Rakan does, and then Rakan offers a little bit more control. Rakan offers maybe some more blue components or blue aspects than some of the other tank support champions inside of the meta. The other thing about this is that when you know that you're going up against Philios, you're pairing it with Xayah. Rakan typically, again, wants to have one direction. And the one direction then tugs at Xayah, and it means that Xayah is going to be pulled in the direction that the follow-up picks are going to tug her in. Because if you end up misaligning the theme or the archetype of the team composition, or if it ends up being misaligned with what the opponents end up drafting, you end up finding yourself in a pretty bad place. So anyways, the enemy responds B2 Aatrox, B3 Thresh. Now, this is fucking awful. It's just awful every single day of the year. But unfortunately, because of your Rakan pick, you now can't recalibrate bot lane, and you're also influencing mid lane as well as jungle due to the champion that you ended up picking. Now, fortunately for you, the Aatrox pick is fucking awful. So, the Aatrox is now going to tug Thresh in the same exact direction that Aatrox is going to be going. Can you guys see this, the champions being moved on the left-hand side? I think that you can. Okay. So, no matter what, Aatrox in the later stages of the game, depending on what you pick, he's not really going to have split push options. He's not magically going to be able to actually threaten side lanes. He's not magically going to be able to push up and do anything like that. Now, what is going to end up happening is that Aatrox has to approach inside of team fights. He obviously has to be short range, he has to be close quarter combat, etc., and Thresh obviously wants to be picking you off, which then by nature makes Thresh a close quarter combat champion and obviously has pairing with Aatrox, which means that this early on in the draft at B2, B3, you're able to identify that and then recalibrate certain parts of the draft in order to handle champions of this theme. And if you end up pinching or doing certain things to where the opponent tries to fix it on B4, B5, you end up misaligning their champions, and then all of a sudden stuff gets really wonky for them and it becomes very problematic. So, it's too much information to actually show this early on, given that these champions don't have other modes. Thresh typically does have another mode, but now he's being dragged down by Aatrox, because Aatrox doesn't have another mode. Aatrox only has one mode, which now means that he's going to tell Thresh that Thresh only really has one mode, or if Thresh is still able to do his other modes and you draft the other modes, then why the fuck are you picking Aatrox? Doesn't make any sense. It's like winning with a deck in Yu-Gi-Oh!, Hearthstone, or Magic the Gathering, and you are timmying for no fucking reason. It is like including the really one random card that serves absolutely no purpose, is completely out of theme with the deck, and you just slot it in there because it's a good card. Well, it doesn't matter if it's a good card if it doesn't serve a purpose in what the deck is trying to achieve. And you'll see this very often inside of trading card games where players that are like semi-competitive or like they're like grinders but they're not really pro players or something, they'll do these really wonky techs where they'll add very random cards that pro players might look at with like a really fucking weird eye, or they'll be like, why is that actually in there? It's not necessary. It is detracting from the value of the deck. It's actually bogging you down in more spots than it's helping you. And what'll end up happening is the person that has put that card in the deck, they'll remember all the times that the card actually did something inside of a match, and they will just conveniently forget or neglect all the times that it was just either dead weight or it didn't actually add anything of value to the victory that you wouldn't have already won anyway with. And so the argument that Aatrox is just a safe, blind, pickable top laner is bullshit, first off, but that's the problem that he's doing right now. He is basically saying fuck you to Aphelios, and he is now dragging Thresh along with him, which then influences the rest of the draft. So, TSM, even though this amount of information is being given, even though you know that Aatrox doesn't have access to anything like this, even though you know how Aatrox and Thresh are now going to be forced to play without compromising the Aatrox, they end up picking the Qiyana. Now, the Qiyana is able to be triple flexed, although obviously she is less common now inside of the jungle because of the nerfs that Riot ended up doing on her, but she's able to be triple flexed. Now, the thing is that when we remove Ornn and Gragas from the equation, because they don't come in until later, we end up noticing that the Xayah and the Rakan are now all sort of doing the same exact thing that the Thresh and the Aatrox are trying to do, except they're trying to do it better with a leg up over the opponent. And then the question ends up becoming why? Why would you do that to yourself? The other thing that the Qiyana pick ends up doing is Qiyana wants to dissuade other physical damage champions from being present, because Qiyana wants to build lethality items, which now means that Aatrox is getting more value out of the certain items that he can end up building, as well as Thresh, and you know, you're now detracting away from Qiyana, because you have basically suggested that you cannot draft physical damage jungler, or you can't draft another physical damage champion that is going to do too much, because otherwise now you're going to have your Qiyana that's hurting the Xayah in terms of future itemization paths, but also you are butting heads for absolutely no reason. Every single champion in the game right now is looking to achieve pretty much something within the same within the same realm. And even if they do so through different means, it doesn't change the fact that they are a part of the same exact colors. And if you don't know what I mean by colors, although I would say that Aphelios actually has blue inside of him, whereas no other champion here really, well, Thresh has blue inside of him. And I guess you can argue that Rakan has a little bit of blue inside of him. But for the most part, the overarching theme of the 6 champions that are already present inside of the draft is very red. And if you don't know what I mean by red, there's a video that someone made of me on YouTube that's like 10 minutes long. You can end up finding out about color explanations and stuff like that. Red is basically just very aggro, very in-your-face, very need to be aggressive, very short burst, very, you know, fucking a spark like a lighter, like it, you know, it lights up, like you hit very key items, and then you start decaying, then you start fading down. You don't actually have an engine to make it into the later stages of the game unless you're accompanied by like aspects of blue or you know, other things that can end up ramping you and making you stronger in the later stages. Just like all of these champions tend to currently, at least not including the AD carries, tend to basically be the same champions 2 items forward. They're not really going to conduct themselves any differently. Now, however, Aatrox is a bit of a bigger red than Qiyana is. And the reason that Aatrox is a bit of a bigger red than Qiyana is because Aatrox has the ability to go into defensive items, which is the exact thing that Qiyana doesn't like. And then because Qiyana is coming in and only being accompanied by the Xayah so far, Qiyana is basically saying that she needs to have magic damage end up coming in to surround her, because if more physical damage ends up coming in, then Aatrox is going to get too much value out of the fact that he's bigger red, and he can itemize into, you know, Sterix, he can have the Ninja Tabi, gets a lot of value out of Guardian Angel, for instance, and these are all things that Qiyana doesn't like. The other thing about Aatrox is he's going to be more sturdy and stable, because now Aatrox suddenly doesn't need to actually do anything other than simply not make mistakes, because the Qiyana tapers off faster than he does, which now means that the Xayah and the Rakan are put on more of a time limit and a clock than the Aatrox is, even though initially when Aatrox was picked, he was the one on a clock. So when you remove Qiyana from the equation and you just had these champions that were lined up, Aatrox is currently the one on a clock, because there's so many options for the red team to come in with on R3. Now, if you had moved Ornn in instead of Qiyana on R3, all of a sudden things get very scary for Aatrox. The Ornn is basically saying that he's still concealing whether or not more physical damage or magic damage champions are coming in. Ornn is also saying that he can go mid-top or jungle, and Ornn is also basically saying that your Aatrox gets severely outscaled, your Thresh is now going to get outscaled, and also the Xayah is going to scale harder than she traditionally would. This now creates a ticking time bomb for Aatrox, even though he's only staring down 3 other champions. So already he's slowly being invalidated. The other thing about Ornn is that if Ornn's ahead, he can actually just shove his fucking dick down Aatrox's throat, and even if Aatrox is ahead, Ornn has modes available to him that allow him to slowly turtle parts of the map along with his teammates and then slowly recover and salvage game states. He also has modes a part of him that he's allowed to play defensively with his Ram ultimate if Aatrox ever tries to go offensive into Ornn. So Ornn thematically ends up countering Aatrox, even if in a vacuum Aatrox is able to go up against Ornn inside of laning phase or something like that, even though Ornn would still be the one that is considered favored. So that's an example of how one champion at a certain stage inside of the draft can sort of change things. Now we move into the ban phase. So when the Qiyana ends up being locked in, you have the Lee Sin and you have the Elise end up getting banned away. I don't think that these things mean anything really in a vacuum. I also think that it's really bad that the Lee Sin ends up getting banned away because you get so much potential value out of, having the ability to just go up against Lee Sin and Aatrox. Lee Sin would also be really conditional on getting advantages, as Aatrox typically is a decaying champion, but when you have the Qiyana, it does become a little bit more problematic. The Elise is very likened to the same exact thing with the Aatrox, but also the Thresh, because Lee Sin or Elise synergizes with both modes of what Aatrox and Thresh are trying to do, even though both bans don't really make sense if you're just simply trying to adjust and respond to what the opponents are doing, because they committed too hard on B2, B3 with their theme champions. They give away way too much information. On Team Blue, I remember commentating this live. I said that it was an insecure Zoe when I saw the LeBlanc ban. Because on B4 and B5, there's actually very few blindable champions, very akin to B1, that would actually be remaining or existing that can't just be picked and function with the rest of the team composition. I think on stream, one of the things I was talking about was actually Orianna as a byproduct to how bad the meta currently is. Orianna would obviously be fine. There's some other, obviously, mid laners that are completely fine as well, if you are confident enough, but you need more information. So Orianna is looking like one of those champions. Zoe is still vulnerable. Corki is actually another one of those champions, although people aren't playing Corki right now. In the mid lane, Corki would be considered one of those champions. Azir, I personally think Azir does suck, but Azir, again, is one of those champions. Orianna is obviously one of those champions, as I've already stated. And so that's the stuff that you're looking at. That's the logic. The Camille gets banned away as a thing where if Camille ends up coming in the later stages, if it's not the Ornn, so if we just swap the Camille, or, well, let's just say that Ornn is Camille. Obviously, in the later stages, one of the aspects of what Aatrox is trying to achieve ends up becoming removed from him, because Camille will actually just overpower him in the side lane eventually, but also Camille can have a more potentially impactful mid-game than Aatrox, depending on a lot of variables. And again, Camille does something better, and she has more modes available than Aatrox. And so that would be, I guess, a surface-level explanation of why Camille ends up getting banned. We move into R4, and Gragas ends up getting picked, and I really do like the Gragas. The thing about the Gragas, though, is that it would actually be a lot better if the Gragas and the Ornn were swapped. And the reason that it's a lot better if the Gragas and the Ornn were swapped is because if Ornn comes in here when the opponent is only showing these three champions, suddenly still you don't know, is Ornn going jungle, mid, or top. So it's still concealing a lot of information, and it's also basically putting a shotgun to Aatrox's face and saying, well, even though the Qiyana wasn't that good of a pick, I'm now threatening to, again, continue to outscale you. You still don't know what sort of a champion is going to come in next, and it allows the opponent to still flex, or retain flex, on both their R3 and R4 champions, and then come in with whatever it is that's going to be necessary against what it is that you're picking. And even if Qiyana jungle ends up still sucking as of the next patch, I don't think that it's the... Is it the current patch? I think I might have actually said that earlier. Maybe it is the current patch. If you end up doing Ornn on R4 and then the opponent picks J4 and then ends up picking Zoe, you have a lot better of an idea of what it is that you're going up against. And if you have Ornn there, you can then make the you could then actually make the decision to do something like actually just pick Karthus. You could R5 Karthus and just have Ornn build him Rabadon's Death Cap, and you could have Qiyana in mid lane and then act as a pseudo funneler to Karthus or something of that nature. The other thing that R4 Ornn ends up doing, if the opponent responds J4 Zoe, is it gives you absolute knowledge of everything that is just going on inside of this game. So now you get to choose, how are you going to do everything, where is everything going to actually end up going, how is it going to go in the early stages. It just gives you so much more control because of the ability to retain all of the flex. And even right here, it also gives you option, I guess, to end up even picking Echo. Echo would end up being fine as well. Could come in on R5, but again, this assumes that the three parties are able to flex champions and whatnot. And stuff like this starts getting more and more interesting. So I think that there's a complete clusterfuck in terms of bans, and then also champions. And when you end up picking Jarvan and Zoe, so let's have them enter the pool against the R4 Ornn. So you'll notice now at this point that the Zoe is very standalone. She's not actually trying to do anything that the other 4 champions on our team are trying to do outside of maybe Aphelios. And even though Thresh in a vacuum is sort of no theme, and again he has alternate modes, he's being dragged down by the Aatrox. So the Aatrox and the Thresh are trying to do one thing. Jarvan's ability to also have extra modes, very similar to Thresh being able to have extra modes, is now influenced and harmed by Aatrox. So he gets pulled into the same bucket that Thresh gets pulled into because this pick fucking sucks. And so now because of this, Zoe and Aphelios are on the other side of the spectrum for what they're trying to achieve. Now, because of the Ornn and because of the Qiyana, the Qiyana threatens actually a lot of danger to 2 of the champions that are the primary carries. And then because these champions don't now function as well as they could have if their function inside of the team is to be mid-rangey or act as some sort of like shield or protectant relative to what the opponent's team composition is, because it detracts from what they were initially picked for. And if you're saying that you're initially picking them in order to do both of these things at once, you fucking suck. That's just, you suck. There are different champions that can achieve the same things with a much more streamlined idea of how to achieve it and offer more at every single point of the game, because this isn't fucking solo queue. So, this is just like trading card games. It is literally identical to trading card games, and it's why, you know, I've always told people pick up like MTG Arena because it's free to play and stuff. Learn how to play draft and try to get like high rated on that, or go on Magic the Gathering Online because that's a much harder environment than MTG Arena, because MTG Arena is much more it's much more widespread, and there's also ways to just keep going infinite on MTG Arena, even if you end up failing at the draft, whereas MTG Online consistently costs money, it is extremely punishing, and it's much less forgiving, so the environment is naturally a lot more competitive. So, anyways, when these champions end up coming in, at the very end, again, there's so many options that you have. Echo can obviously come in on R5, you can have Karthus come in on R5, what are other R5 champions that are all fine? Echo R5, Karthus R5, Echo R5, Karthus R5. Fucking, the Qiyana sucks, dude. Qiyana actually makes this so fucking awful. What a terrible champion. Holy mother of God. I mean, you can Gragas R5, so you have Gragas, Echo, Karthus on R5. That's completely fine. You can have Charles on R5. Charles on R5 is completely fine as well, although it's obviously a lot more difficult. If you don't know what I'm talking about Charles, I'm talking about Cho'Gath. So Cho'Gath on R5 is completely fine. You can't Alawi on R5. That doesn't work at all. You don't want, you can't Vladimir on R5. You could Victor on R5. Victor on R5 would be another possibility if you're willing to send the Ornn into the jungle. That would be completely fine because Victor is so, efficient at just everything that, they're trying to do. Orianna on R5 also isn't that bad, but obviously the other champions that I've listed so far end up achieving everything that trying to do, but better. Corki on R5 is also not bad at all. So, like, you have Corki, Echo, Gragas, Victor, Karthus. All of those are really good. And then there's some physical damage champions that you could end up R5ing, but none of them are as ideal as the ones that I'm listing. There's an argument that you could definitely make about having Cassiopeia on R5 for sure. Again, it requires Ornn to be willing to go into the jungle, and then the Qiyana to just play up in top lane. The thing about the Cassiopeia that isn't as good is that she is... Even though she's really good against a lot of the champions, there are some things that are problematic for her, which is mostly a heavy reliance on Ornn. Heavy reliance on Ornn, but it further enables Zoe, which is currently the only out that the enemy team has. So when you're talking about R5 champions, you want champions that basically disrupt and strangle the Zoe aspect, because the Zoe Aphelios aspect is the only way that's going to end up salvaging them. And so this is pretty much what's going on. Yeah. No, Lissandra doesn't work. Too short range, doesn't do anything. Also, it loses to Zoe. Doesn't make sense. Nope, Talia doesn't do it. Talia's worse than Cassiopeia. Malzahar doesn't do it. Soraka is variance, for sure, but Soraka is possible. You could R5 Soraka. And then, yeah, you could R5 Soraka. But the problem is that Kiana ends up having to... Dude, Kiana is just such a shit pick, man. It actually makes things so hard. Now, the other thing to talk about, in this regard... Yeah, you can Vel'Koz R5 too. You can actually... Yeah, you can Vel'Koz R5. Vel'Koz R5 is, very, very good as well. Vel R5 is super good. And then you just send, the Ornn into the jungle. And that's totally fine. Vel R5 is fine. The Gragas does end up being fine, but TSM's draft has two really big problems. The Rakan on R2, and the Kiana on R3. Really makes things very, very, very bad for them. It limits a lot of options, and it limits diversity. I also think that the Xayah on R1 is worse than Senna, but it ends up being semi-acceptable. Now, you'll notice that the one thing about Xayah is that Xayah doesn't actually do anything here, other than being one of the few crit ADCs that actually ends up scaling, and has some outs to some of the very small, nuanced engages that the blue team has. Outside of that, she doesn't do anything. Literally does nothing. Her only job is to function with Rakan as a beat stick. She's just a big champion that the enemy team doesn't really care about. And that's a problem about Xayah in this spot. Anivia's not good. She does get 1,000 free gold, but we're also talking about Senna, who also gets Senna gets a lot of value too. So TSM's draft is really bad. Well, like, it's not super bad because obviously they have lots of ways of still winning on R5. I mean, they're like on R4 they still have ways to be winning, which is a testament to how atrocious B2 B3 Aatrox Thresh is. And then this is also one of the things why, like, the image that I tweeted on Twitter, if you guys end up remembering, I think it's so hilarious. Because I forget what it ends up being called. The thing about I don't know if it's a thing about Dunning-Kruger or like what it is. When people think that something is a lot simpler than it actually perceives to be, and that's mostly because you've entered into something and you haven't been there enough. So on the surface level, it looks fine. You know that image I tweeted out? I don't know how to show this to you. This is the funniest thing in the world. This is the funniest thing in the world, because the reason that I think it's so funny is wait, what? How's the showing? It's still showing. Oh, because it's the same window. Oh, cool. Oh, it's same window. Oh, cool. Okay, cool. I didn't know I could just do that. All right, awesome, great. The reason, like, we can sit here and we can spitball champions over and over and over, right? The problem is that if you don't know what those champions do against other champions, or you don't know the limits of those champions and how they're going to tend to conduct themselves at various points inside of the game, you actually just can't suggest them. You can suggest them and end up being right. The same way that some people in chat ended up suggesting like Orianna or suggesting Vel'Koz and other stuff like that. It doesn't make it okay. You know, a gold level player that has only one trick Blitzcrank all of his life and then thinks to himself, well, Vel'Koz might be good here, doesn't get all the reasons why Vel'Koz might be good here. And if you don't get all the reasons why Vel'Koz might not be good here, then in future situations you could have a very similar suggestion and have arrived at it by false means. And if that ends up happening, you don't really know what's going on inside of draft. And so what ends up happening in pro play a lot right now is people try to get vacuum counter matchups, and they dub that a one draft. I remember one of the previous LCS coaches actually tweeted at me yesterday, and he talked about how in a lot of like draft meetings and draft discussions, what teams and coaches and analysts try to do is they try to just counter. They just try to get like base level counter picks without any regards to synergy or team cohesion or what certain things are going to end up being viable at different stages of the game. without any regard to that, but also in terms of just value, right? And what I mean by value is, like, obviously a Kiana wakes up and has more effectiveness than an Aatrox on low economy, right? That's just something that is going to be understood. A Kiana is just going to have a lot more value than an Aatrox on low economy. A Senna is going to have a lot more value than an MF on low economy. A Senna is going to have more value than a Xayah on low economy. Okay. And why is Senna going to have more value than Xayah and MF and Jinx and these other champions? Or why is Senna going to be so strong? And it's because of her kit, right? But it's also because of her how her kit interacts with other champions that are inside of the meta. And so what that ends up meaning is that if bot lane even ends up falling behind and stuff, it's not the end of the world, which is why during casts and stuff, sometimes there's 4, 5, 6,000 gold advantages at 23 minutes, and I'll say that the team that is actually down 6,000 is winning. And it's because of, like, how likely professional players are to conduct themselves in a team fight, posture for a team fight, etc. And this is why also by like some of my LCK casts with, like, the bottom tier teams, or also whenever I'm doing coach streaming, is when I say that there are drafts that are, like, losing, and I just don't know if the discrepancy is going to end up mattering. You know, like, I just don't know if it's going to matter all that much. And, like, obviously, yesterday I pointed out, like, the J4 that is, like, self-countering himself to a certain extent when they ended up locking it in. What did I just do? Sorry. J4 ends up, like, self-countering himself. The Zoe makes herself more prone. The Zoe makes Aphelios a hotter target. The Zoe makes more R5 options become increasingly more difficult. Hi, Artemis791997, thank you. What? Aatrox actually beats Fiora if you're really good at it? Refresh for new champions? Wait, what do you mean? Is it fixed? Oh! Who fixed it? Wait, are you the guy? Whoa. Wait, are you the guy? Wait, are you the developer of this site? Wait, where is he? A field of poppies. No. Where is he? A field of poppies. Is that the guy? Where is he? I was, like, looking for you on Discord and I couldn't find you. He subbed? Where is he? Why isn't he typing? Shit. What is his ID? Oh my god. He's VIP or what? Oh, he is a mod! Oh, you're the guy. Hello! Give me my Twitch Prime for the sole reason you become an extra McDonald's meal when you what? Oh my god, you are the guy! Dude! Okay, message me on Discord, please. Thank you so much for updating the API. Okay. That's really good. Holy shit. Is Nemesis here? Or did Nemesis leave? Nemesis leave or what? Is Crownshot here? Crownshot left too. I can't deal with this. Hi, Kolsky. Thank you so much for updating the API. Hello, Nemesis. So that's how drafting works. Now, drafting gets really hard because a lot of pro players, and there's quite a few of them actually in chat right now, so I don't know which ones will type or which ones won't. There's quite a lot in chat right now. A lot of pro players, truthfully, do not know a lot about each other's roles or each other's champions. And you can hear this inside of mic checks. You can see this inside of backstage content. Where, like, people are on recording and stuff. And if the pro players don't know stuff about champions, then the coach doesn't know stuff about champions. And so, even watching footage or, like, film, as, like, NA players and stuff would like to call it, it doesn't tell you anything about the champions. It can, in fact, lead you to false conclusions. It can lead you to believing that Aatrox is actually fine against Gangplank. It can lead you to believing that certain matchups are actually unfavorable, even though they're not. It'll lead you to believing that LeBlanc is good against Zoe. It will, you know, it will lead you to believing that I don't know, what's another top lane matchup or something. It'll lead you to believing you know, like Set is good against Fiora. It'll do a lot of things. It'll lead you to believing that Ornn can't like resist most of the matchups that people think counters him. So so then what ends up happening is if the coach and analyst can't play the game, or they're not high MMR, or they do play the game but their view of the game is extremely limited, then they have to rely on feedback from pro players to an unhealthy degree. There's obviously feedback from pro players that is a healthy degree, which is the ability to be basically given a select amount of information and then extrapolate from that a lot of other things. But most of the time that's not the case. The Shy actually talked about this in one of his interviews that ended up getting posted on Reddit. So drafting's not easy, and when people say that drafting is easy, it's the stupidest thing in the world. It's like the people that say that like Arena is easy on Hearthstone, even though they can't average more than 3 wins. It's the same people that say that drafting is easy in Magic the Gathering, even though there are pro players that are really bad at Magic the Gathering drafting. Even though they're insane at Standard, Modern, Legacy, Vintage, etc., they're really, really good. Or there's even actually pro players that aren't very good at certain formats, like the Vintage, you know, the Vintage different and stuff like that. So just picking like high win rates isn't very good. So let's go over the Fnatic versus G2 draft. Fnatic versus G2 Reddit. Let's take a look. Post game thread, 2020. So let's take a look at this one, and then we'll talk about other drafting. And this isn't also so like I got message earlier, right? Like someone was asking me like, how do I get better at drafting? And that's such a weird question, right? Because it's not something that you just decide to do. You like imagine like I don't even know how to describe this. Like you don't just pick champions, right? Picking champions doesn't mean anything if you don't understand what the champions are doing or trying to achieve. You'll end up making asinine comments like Veigar's a bad champion, okay? Or that Veigar was a bad pick for Fnatic. Holy moly guacamole. So the first thing that you should do is get to a point in the game where you can actually grapple with pro players. In any region, just get to that point initially, and then step outside of the box. Step outside of the box from what you perceive to be accurate. Look at things from the angle of how something like approach it by asking questions, and then hitting it with lots of facts and seeing if the facts actually stand up. You know, across a wide range of testing and stuff like that. The same way that any pro player would actually go and learn a matchup. No, Bren's bad. Alright. So, this is the backup thread. So, G2 ban Set. G2 ban Ornn. And these are actually these are red side. These are actual bans, by the way. And then Gragas, even though they're B1able. These are legit. Well, Set isn't a real ban because you can draft around Set, but the Ornn and the Gragas are both real bans. Ornn and Gragas are definitely both real bans, but because there's so many champions like Ornn and Gragas, you have to have a really good reason to ban Ornn and Gragas. Akali is not a real ban. Soraka is absolutely a real ban, but Akali is not. But would require ADC, mid, and top to all be able to play champions that actually punish her, but then also have a lot of good team cohesion. Syndra is also a red side ban. So Soraka and Syndra are both acceptable red side bans, the same way that Ornn and Gragas are actually both acceptable blue side bans. Okay. They open with Senna B1, and this is actually maybe my favorite B1 right now. I don't know, like, Ornn, like, it's really close. Like, Ornn and Senna, are two of my favorite B1s. I think that they're so good. Ornn is obviously a little bit easier to handle. Like, there's still ways to handle Ornn. You know, I mean, the same can be said for any champion, but I think that B1 Senna is one of the best in the game right now. I think B1 Senna is absolutely one of the best. Fnatic responds with Lee Song and Aphelios, and already there's a problem. And the problem is that Lee Sin, even though he's a very good champion inside of a vacuum and his base stats are really, really strong, he's too telling of a champion. There's many, many times where Lee Sin will find himself in situations where the enemy team doesn't actually allow him in, or they don't have viable kick targets. That's a really, really big fucking problem. Doesn't matter that Lee Sin is really good as a champion and that you can do a lot, because if you're so confident in your own ability to just simply do a lot, you should then just want to pick champions that are safer and allow you to get to stages of the game where skill expression is going to be able to carry you more. Sort of like the posturing in like the T1 games, where T1 is able to mechanically break down their opponent, or like the Dragon X game, where Dragon X shouldn't have been able to win, or T1 shouldn't have been able to win, Gen G shouldn't have been able to win. Spots like those, you should be able to just outmuscle your opponent with a lot better of a wallet, basically, by having better picks. So the Lee Sin is already a pretty bad pick. Aphelios is completely fine. As we already talked about in the last draft, Aphelios is a B1-able champion. He's certainly an R1-able champion as well. But again, for champions like Senna and Aphelios and MF, I might come back in like 2 to 3 months from now when there's a lot more time to further like research or understand them, and I might think like, oh, okay, this champion's actually bad, or not that the champion's actually bad, but the champion might not actually be B1 or R1-able, even though I think that they are in their current state. And obviously other champions that I'm talking about, like Ornn and Gangplank and stuff like that, they are so fleshed out and understood because they've been around for so long that it's a lot easier to assess and evaluate them in their current standing. This is very akin to like how I say, like, you know, a couple of years from now, I think people will actually look back at a champion like Olaf and understand that it's bad. And that's mostly because League of Legends is rapidly accelerating in the last couple of years in terms of just like there's so much more content, there's so much more stuff to just be dissected, and there's so much stuff just you know, being tried out, and you know, teams have more staff, and the infrastructure is getting better globally, and everything is just getting better. And so all of that is obviously having an effect where things are being, you know, figured out more and researched and studies and stuff. And yet in the same light, we still have sets building Black Cleaver, so there's that, you know. We also still have Morellonomicon, and then we also have pro players that don't know, you know, that Leandri's and Rylai stacks, you know, so that's a thing. That's you know, any truths, or I think he left. I think that one just broke him. No, it's not OP picks first. That's what I just talked about. Thoughts on Edge of Night against Vayne? What? Oh yeah, I gotta remove the text at the bottom. All right, so that's removed. Okay. All right, so let's get further into the G2 draft. So let's take a look. And then G2 ends up responding Aatrox. Aatrox and Elise. Now both of these are bad picks. The reason that they're bad picks is even if they have some form of synergy with the Senna, they're off theme with Senna in terms of their color scheme and in terms of the other modes that they have available. Elise is not, even though she can function on low economy, because of the nature of jungle right now and because of some junglers that do exist that just simply aren't being picked, because better teams want to just try to get advantages and coin flip and sin and everything like that. It's really great. Elise is not actually that good of a fucking champion. If teams just actually played better, her weaknesses would get exposed more and more and more, which is oftentimes why you see Elise's end up doing fuck all nothing. And then obviously there's times where they get really fed, and then they still don't really do anything as they transition into mid and late game and stuff, and this is a problem with the champion. So even though Aatrox and Elise are both basically on the same theme, they're detracting from Senna and they're pulling away from her value. The other thing about this is both of them are extremely telling of what they're trying to achieve. They basically paint a picture right from the get-go that neither of them have other modes available to them. They're very honest and upfront with, and it doesn't make them honest champions, they're absolutely sinners, they're not saints. They're telling you everything that they're going to do and how they need to do it, and if they don't do that, if you just simply resist it by going even, because you're a fucking pro player, they end up being less viable. They end up being significantly weaker than other things that could have ended up being picked. And so the fact that the champion's theme itself tells you so much about them allows you in draft on R3, R4, R5 to just respond to it. So both of these champions are basically red and black. Even though Elise has like some blue aspects and whatnot, they're both pretty much red-black. They have conditions that need to be met, and if those conditions aren't met, they end up sucking. Now, there was a time when Aatrox was super overtuned, and it didn't matter about said conditions. It didn't matter that the fact that he was red. His numbers were so strong that he broke the norm. The same way that, you know, there can be trading card game cards that only go into Paladin or Shaman or Warlock or something like that, or in Magic they're blue, they're green, they're red, etc. But they're so imbalanced, they warp everything around them, and even decks that might not want to play them end up playing them or finding ways to play them because they're just so fucking strong that it doesn't matter if they're off theme or not because they're overtuned. So the Elise Aatrox both suck. But what ends up happening here is Fnatic does a really shitty fucking response, which was completely terrible, which is Nautilus. So even though Nautilus is able to resist, we'll just have the champions facing each other right now. Even though Nautilus is able to resist aspects of what Aatrox and Elise are both trying to do, there's a lot more value to be gained by just getting your counter of Aatrox out of the way, especially one that's able to be flexed, because Aatrox is basically showing that no matter what, he has to be mid and top at this point. Elise doesn't have any sort of flexibility. So we saw in this draft that they're going to end up drafting Gangplank later, which means that you could have either saved your support pick for R4, or you could have chosen another blind, super flexible pick on R4, and then you could have countered their theme composition with a mage support on R5 in order to get even more scaling inside of your team composition. And the reason that you would want to add more scaling and just have flexible mid and top laners that are going to be self-sufficient with your Lee Sin is because the enemy has already showed you basically 2 decay champions. Decay is going to be a term that I'm probably going to start using in the future. I found out that Koreans have a word for this, and I thought that it was so intriguing. It's basically champions that they end up hitting something and then they start falling off a cliff, sort of like hitting menopause. And so they're basically champions that have menopause, so they suffer from it. So Elise has some cases where she is able to scale as a champion when she's surrounded by a lot of physical damage, and when the enemy team composition maybe has like a lot of clumping and stuff, and Runic Echo plus Liandry's Torment can end up being viable if they have like a lot of physical damage champions that can't really build a lot of magic resistances. They have lots of HP and stuff, and she can go the Liandry's Torment. She doesn't need to go any sort of utility with Zanya's Hourglass or anything like that, and she can go into more beefier stats that allow her Voidling or her Spiderling with the Runic Echo proc and everything to actually be valuable in the later stages, as well as if the enemy team actually has to come into her and her physical damage champions are mostly just trying to scale and protect another core piece of their comp. It requires like a lot of stars to fucking align. But those are going to be the cases where Elise isn't decaying. But as it stands right now, you have 2 decaying champions, and then you have a Senna that is really, really strong. And the reason that Aatrox, even though I mentioned in the TSM versus Golden Guardians draft, was able to go up to 3 and 4 items, it was mostly a byproduct of the Kiana that was picked so early on, and what the Kiana would end up meaning because of the Xayah and the Rakan pick as well, would allow Aatrox to actually go up to further items. But as it stands right now, Aatrox is looking like he's mostly going to end up being a 2-item champion, depending on how the red team will follow up their draft. So right now he is extremely vulnerable to being cracked. Same thing with Elise, as long as you have good play. So the Nautilus is obviously a way to get onto Senna. Great, it's a vacuum. Nautilus has a way to disrupt the Aatrox engage and provide peel for the Aphelios and stuff. Also able to do some stuff against the Elise. Great, awesome, cool. So one of those things is in a vacuum, and the other things is not as good as the advantages that you could end up obtaining by doing something here like Gangplank on R3, and then R4ing a blindable self-sustaining mid laner, and then R5ing a mage support. And what that would end up doing, we could run out an example of this right now. So like an efficient mage support or something that would be completely fine. Let's say that you R4 like Orianna or something, even though, whatever, I don't really like Orianna. Well, hold on, actually, what did G2 end up picking? G2 ended up picking, okay, they ended up picking Ryze, and they banned Cassiopeia. They banned Cassiopeia and Thresh. So let me just get these out of the way. They banned Cass and Thresh, and then Fnatic ended up banning Lucian. I don't fucking know why. Again, this is one of those things that it just... Well, I feel like the Lucian actually gives... Ooh, Lucian gives away the Gangplank. They banned away Lucian, and they banned away Kiana. And again, this is a team problem thing. Because if your team was a lot better and was working as a hive mind, you're not going to be banning away these champions. You would be inviting them in. And so right here, let's say that in this spot, let's take a look at champions that are going to be able to be self-sufficient and just completely safe against stuff. So you're looking at Orianna, you're looking at Corki, you're looking at Orianna. Orianna is really good against some of the other champions that the enemy team might be thinking about. Corki is actually fine. You don't want to... Syndra is actually banned away. I guess... well, no, you don't want to be picking Zoe. Victor is really weird. I think Victor is actually a pretty shitty champion. So you don't want to be picking Victor by any means. You don't want to be picking... you don't want to be picking Cho'Gath. You don't want to be picking Echo. Unless like you're completely comfortable to be flexing. You could choose Karma here. And put a lot of the eggs into the Aphelios and the Gangplank basket. And one of the things that you might be noticing is that the Lee Sin is a problem. Because what we're looking for basically is we're looking for champions that are able to be self-sufficient, but also offer some amount of value in terms of utility or damage as well. And a lot of this is stemming from the fact that Lee Sin fucking sucks. Because what we're trying to do right now is we're trying to gravitate away from Lee Sin. It's weird how that works. We're actually trying to make our R4, R5 go away from what Lee is trying to accomplish, which ends up exposing him as an off-theme shitty fucking champion that has no place inside of the draft, even though Lee Sin is able to be picked in other spots inside of drafts where he would end up being pretty okay. I think that there's other champions that you can end up picking if you're really good at them, regardless of the counter picks that can end up existing. But obviously, you're looking like Corki. Corki's really good. Orianna's really good. What else is really good here? Corki, Orianna, Diana sucks. I think Aurelion Soul is. I think Aurelion Soul is almost actually okay. But I wouldn't personally like him. I think that Zillion sucks here, unfortunately, even though I think Zillion's a really good champion. I think that Vladimir is actually vulnerable here as well. I think that Rumble also doesn't achieve what you're trying to do. So I think that Rumble is way too heavy of a commitment, although I would acknowledge that Rumble is actually a possible champion. It doesn't feel that good, and it also puts a lot of pressure onto Aphelios. So that obviously that really sucks. And then again, the Lee Sin is just really fucking us right now. So it really, really, really fucking sucks. Outside of that, Karma is obviously a champion that is okay in a spot like this. We already talked about why Cho'Gath isn't okay. Corki is really good here. I guess you can say that Azir is okay here, but obviously I hate Azir. I don't think that Azir is good. Anivia is actually really close here. Anivia isn't that bad here either. If you're really good at Anivia, but it also requires your teammates to be willing to play in a way that allows Anivia to be okay. And then I think that if you're insane at the champion, I think that Vel'Koz is actually probably fine here as well. And so there's definitely quite a few champions. But for sake of the argument, let's do something that is going to be relatively standard. Let's do something like Orianna. Let's say that G2 ends up doing what they did anyway, and they end up going Ryze, and then their other champion pick, which ended up being Braum. So in this spot, so that's a pretty good checkmate. So in this spot, when they're showing you these 5 champions, you'll notice that all of them are extremely slow range. Some people will say, well, Fnatic can just shoot Zyra's plants. Congratulations. Awesome. Great. Don't care. Now, there's other mage supports that can come in a spot like this and be completely fine. You can obviously add Vel'Koz right here. Vel'Koz would be completely fine. You can have Bard on R5 as well, but obviously Zyra is really good on R5 here. And when you have these champions against these champions, you'll notice that you have winning top lane. You have neutralizing mid lane. You have a jungler that is actually going to function better than the enemy team jungler is going to function against you. And then the other thing is that your jungler only actually has to match counter gank the Elise, which means that they are allowed to actually be slower than the opponent and still be completely fine due to the nature of the mid and the top lane. And if the Elise doesn't end up showing up big in the earlier stages of the game, your team composition ends up being really, really fucking strong. Okay, that's how this works, and we still have yet to have another champion. Senna and Braum obviously come in, but Braum makes every single champion on this team extremely short range. It makes them all need to go into melee combat, because Aatrox can't move the gangplank in the side lane at any point of the game, and also because the gangplank is so strong and provides the AoE coverage and also ways to protect other lanes, and then again be self-sufficient because he scales up against this team. Because he has so much value in terms of the items that he can buy, because the Orianna is inside of the game, etc., the Aatrox ended up being really hindered, because Aatrox now ends up having to become an engagement champion. Now, let's say that you move the Aatrox into the mid lane, you try to move the Ryze into the top lane in order to counter the gangplank, obviously. You can play like a mini lane swap game and whatnot, and you can say that Ryze eventually begins to move gangplank in the side lane. Ryze does not begin to move gangplank in the side lane until 31, 32, 33 plus minutes, at which point the Aatrox Elise composition is already losing. This also is not yet including the support pick, and if you factor in that champions like Bard end up existing, or other mages that can end up just getting onto Ryze and scaling up and whatnot, Ryze doesn't get to magically just go into the side lane. This is why all of the variables are important, and it's not as black and white, because suddenly, even with just these 4 champions, we're already seeing that there is an overarching theme that is problematic for the blue team, where at several angles inside of this game, even without the support pick even having been selected yet, there is already clear problems that occur if the blue team goes even. And now obviously you enter with the obnoxious comments or the ignorant comments like, well, Jankos just has to get the lanes ahead. Yeah, just do it, 5-head. Like, what are you saying? What do you think is actually easier? Manipulating your lanes as Ryze and Aatrox in losing matchups to be favorable for your Elise to arrive against the Lee Sin, and then get the gank off against other pro players that know that's what you need to do, and have a jungler that can outpace you, show up slower than you, and still be more relevant, or the Gangplank Orianna and the Lee Sin knowing that that's what the opponents have to do, and just playing around it, and then waking up with a big fucking balance in their bank account. What are we saying? Like, stop. The ask, the responsibility, everything is so much harder out of the blue team, and the payoff just isn't there, because these champions still, even if they're down in gold, they function better on lower economy. They're still able to do things and dissuade certain things from the blue team. So this is just an example of how, if Fnatic plays out the draft differently, it's completely different. Obviously, we've also identified, even before getting to R4, that Lee Sin fucking sucks on R2. He's coming in too early, that there's no reason when the opponent shows their face this early on. It just really sucks. Now, I do think R1, R2, ADC jungle is completely fine. And we're wondering, like, well, what junglers are actually available when Gragas and Ornn do end up getting pinched and whatnot. I think at that point, you just R1, R2, a double B1 champion. So like Aphelios, Gangplank can actually just come in, even if they end up countering the Gangplank, it's completely fine. Alternatively, if you R1 the Aphelios and you're looking for other junglers, you choose junglers that are able to be flexed into multiple roles. Now, obviously, Gragas is definitely one of those champions. I think that Pantheon, as much as he does suck, I think that he's also one of those champions. In that regard, I think Poppy is one of those champions. In that regard, I think Maokai actually really sucks. Maokai actually doesn't suck. Maokai is pretty viable in top lane, and if you guys were listening to Shrimp talk the other day, Shrimp thinks that Maokai is actually pretty good even inside of the jungle. And so you could also Taliyah on you could Taliyah on R2. Taliyah on R2 would be fine as well. If your support player is able to play Taliyah, and if your mid laner is able to play Taliyah, and your jungler is able to play Taliyah. Because it's all about concealing information and then trying to respond to what the opponent is trying to achieve. Taliyah is really good against a wide array of meta picks right now, and she just outright annihilates some champions in a vacuum, and so in that regard, she's pretty good as well. So Lee Sin on R2 has weaknesses. Even if they don't end up getting exposed all the time, it doesn't change that they are still a weakness. But like Bard on R4 is really good. Zyra in this spot on R4 or R5 is really good. Vel'Koz on R5 is really good. What's another thing on R5 that is going to end up being really good? Soraka would obviously be good on R5. Yuumi is okay here on R5. Yumi's completely fine on R5. Rumble is okay on R5 because you would use him defensively, so it would be a support Rumble. Although Rumble obviously isn't as good as some of the others that I just ended up mentioning. Lulu is okay on R5, but not as good as, again, the other mages that I ended up mentioning. And so there basically ends up being a tier list of mages in terms of like what is actually viable and what is actually able to be picked. Xerath is able to be picked on R5. But I think that champions like Vel'Koz or champions like Bard and champions like Zyra are just going to be a lot better. Champion like Zillion is able to be picked on R5 for sure as well. Taliyah is able to be picked on R5. Taliyah actually gives you insane amounts of control and ability. So that's pretty much that. But as it stands, these ended up being the picks. And then what did Fnatic do? What did Fnatic do? Oh no, sorry. They did Gangplank here, and then what they did on R4 was Nautilus, and this just makes no fucking sense. Just makes no sense. And maybe I don't know. I guess they want to give counter pick over to Nemesis, but again, if the team cohesion and everything is really really good, you can get a lot more value out of an R5 counter pick than I think that you can out of a mid lane counter pick. Because it would basically make it so that you have 5 champions that are doing something instead of 4. Even if one of the 4 is really, really, really good, I think it's a lot better to have 2 artillery mages than it would just be to have one that outright annihilates the enemy team. Nemesis is actually in chat right now, so I'll just ask him if he agrees with that. He says, yes, I do. Okay. Great. So as it stands, R4 Nautilus is suboptimal compared to R4 Orianna, R4 Corki, R4 Anivia. And again, all of these champions have different nuances in what they can end up being paired with on R5, but you also have to ask yourself, what are these champions doing? Well, Orianna is shutting down the ability to pick Ryze. Orianna is shutting down the ability to pick something like Vladimir. Orianna is shutting down champions that aren't going to have a lot of synergy with Elise. Orianna is creating problems if they do end up picking a melee support champion. Orianna is really good if they end up picking some sort of like melee utility support champion, which I guess falls into the same exact book. Orianna is really good if they end up trying to pick something giga cheesy inside of mid lane. Orianna is really good at offering an insurance policy. Corki, same exact things end up applying. And that actually reminds me, I have to message something on Discord. And so there's the other champions that ended up going over as well. Karma fulfills the same exact role, but you're looking for champions that offer the 1-2 punch, sort of like how I said that it's a lot better to have 2 mages offering like artillery cannons than it is to just have 1 super mage, relative to the dynamic of the enemy team having multiple decaying champions. So they are for Nautilus, which is really fucking awful, and then enemy team ends up going Ryze and ends up going Braum, and even like right here, now this just feels bad. Now your options are obviously limited. You have Veigar, Cassiopeia is another obvious answer. So you have Veigar, you have Cassiopeia, you actually get Cho'Gath. Cho'Gath actually comes online. Cho ends up being enabled. I don't know where he is. I don't know why I can't select him. Where is he? Where's Cho? Huh? You have Cho'Gath can actually come in, and you'll notice that all of these champions are winning. They're winning lines against what the opponent's trying to do. Cho'Gath disrupts the Aatrox engage, disrupts Braum, makes the Elise fucking nonsense, makes the Ryze nonsense, and all of a sudden Senna is left on an island. And then the Cho'Gath is so sturdy and durable, it ends up enabling the Aphelios, and it ends up enabling the Gangplank, has a lot of synergy with the Gangplank, has so much disruption, ruins a lot of the blue team modes and gauges because of his Rupture and his Silence, has different modes where he can end up sieging and poking due to the nature of his Rupture. If the opponent tries to engage into him, again, defensive Ruptures, defensive Silences, he has the defensive items, he's able to actually itemize into Zanya's Hourglass and stuff. He functions on lower economy than the enemy champions, which means he comes online faster, which is in synergy with the Lee Sin and with the Gangplank. He just does so many fucking things. That's just how this works, okay? It's just really how this works. Malzahar can actually come in on R5. Same exact thing. Futures Market Malzahar does really good against all of these champions. Also has a natural Banshee's Veil, which is really good against the Elise. And again, fulfills the same exact road similar to Cho'Gath. Has a lot of the similar modes, and you'll also notice that they're in the similar colors. Vel'Koz is another champion that can end up coming in on R5. And all of these things are just so good. So like the Veigar, the reason that the Veigar, why can't I find Veigar? Where the hell is he? Veigar. Okay. So the reason that the Veigar is so good is Veigar comes in on R5, and what do you want this blue team composition to do? Ryze can't realistically move Gangplank until 30 plus minutes in the side lane. Gangplank can keep just, pushing back waves and stuff, and that's completely fine if he just has his R. Veigar outscales everyone on the enemy team, and eventually what's going to end up happening is Aphelios and friends are going to hit 2.5, 3 items, and now all of a sudden, even though Ryze can't move the Gangplank down in the bottom lane, all that you have to do is hold a Phalanx for the Veigar and the Aphelios, and now you'll also notice that the Lee Sin is playing a defensive game, which again shows that the Lee Sin is kind of awkward in this team comp. You also see that the Nautilus ends up being very awkward in this team composition, because the defensive mode actually suffers a little bit against the Elise and against the Braum, even though Nautilus in the vacuum is okay against Elise trying to engage. It's mostly that it's coupled with the Braum, but also being close up and turtled with your teammates against the Ryze and whatnot. And even though you're trying to reach the Senna, the rest of your teammates don't care about reaching the Senna. They just basically care about holding a Phalanx and then winning out from there. So it basically, every stage of the map, the Veigar suffocates so many options away from the blue team. Blue team doesn't have access to 1-3-1 because it's just able to be held really easily up in the top lane. The red team comes online a lot stronger than the blue team does at 2 items plus, and the Ryze ends up becoming the only out for the enemy team. Senna is extremely off theme, and so assuming even skill, even though the Nautilus and the Lee Sin are both problematic picks inside of the team composition, the Veigar and Aphelios ruin everything that the blue team is trying to achieve. And Veigar just fucking bops everyone. Because you're going to have an Aatrox that's going to build Ninja Tab Eyes. You're going to have an Elise that has mobility boots, or maybe she's going to have Sork Pen boots. But if she ends up having Sork Pen boots and Gangplank, Lee Sin, and Veigar end up building MR, because Veigar is perfectly reasonable that he ends up getting Banshee's Veil at some point inside of the game. Perfectly reasonable for Lee Sin and Gangplank to end up getting magic resistance as well, like a Merc Treads or whatnot. Even if, you would say that Gangplank would want to get, Ninja Tab Eye or something against Aatrox, he really doesn't need it. You can just sit in top lane on tier 1 boots because of the way that you're going to conduct yourself as a champion inside of the game. Everything's going to be fine there, and Gangplank just annihilates Aatrox anyway because he's always in total control of the matchup. And his jungler knows that Lee Sin can look at this and say, hey, my Gangplank functions better than Aatrox. Veigar functions better than Ryze. I can actually operate on lower economy than Elise, and my laners are infinitely more relevant. But then I, as Lee Sin, is also more relevant than Elise is in a vacuum relative to the dynamics of all the champions inside of the game. And even though Senna is a fantastic champion, she's so pried away from what she's trying to achieve. Now, if it's a solo queue game, a lot of this stuff doesn't end up mattering because there's not a lot of cohesion. We're not talking about pro players at that point. Senna, obviously, if your Ryze, Elise, and Aatrox are cutting into the opponent, if the opponent doesn't have a lot of ways to stabilize or disrupt a full-on engage or, morph any of the terrain with, abilities that can end up doing that, and obviously I'm referring to, Event Horizon, or Alawi Tentacles, or fucking Work Ground, or Ziggs thingy, or stuff of that nature, then they get to just run forward, and Senna just basically gets to act like a fucking Soraka meets Ezreal while going into the enemy. But those aren't the variables that are present, and it's not black and white like that. It's very gray, and you have to zoom in on what is actually going to happen in isolation and talk about the minutia. And so in that regard, Vigar is fantastic. Nautilus and Lee Sin end up becoming the problematic picks, and I didn't watch the game yet, but if someone actually says something about Vigar here, they probably don't play the game, or if they do, they probably play it at a very low level. And when you play it at a very low level and all that you do is watch film or you watch games and stuff, you don't really understand what it feels like to play against Vigar. You don't know what it feels like in certain spots of the game when he is fucking strangling you with both of his hands, and how limited you are in options and how much you need the enemy team to make a mistake in order for anything that you do to be worthwhile or relevant, because eventually Vigar is just a bomb that is going to go off and you're going to feel it. Okay, so that was the second game that we just discussed draft. Said Impact didn't know. I think most people don't know how to play the Gangplank Atrox matchup, and I went over a lot of it during Worlds. I believe that the VODs are still up, so